All right. Hi, everybody. It's our CFB Talk 173. It's Tuesday night. This is when we like to talk to you about what's going on in college football. Lots to talk about. We just went through the semifinals yesterday. We had some other games in the last week, including devouring a live mascot that had converted into a Pop Tart. So that was great. So anyway, let's talk about what's been going on. I see you, John. I'm going to go ahead and let you up right now. As we kind of get into this, I always like to there's so many topics we can get into, but one of the ones that kind of caught my attention earlier today, and this was a nice report by Matt Rodak, who is 247's Alabama writer. And he wanted to kind of see if he could get in touch with Seth McLaughlin, the Alabama center, immediately after the game. And he didn't want to talk. The center didn't want to talk. Kind of get why. So we did a little bit of additional reporting, and he got just a quote for the ages from Michigan defensive lineman Chris Jenkins. And, you can read this however you want, but the quote is, again, this is Michigan defensive lineman Chris Jenkins on Alabama center Seth MacFarlane's snaps. I was kind of surprised. I was like, what happened, bro? I was genuinely confused. I wasn't even trying to trash talk. I was like, what's going on? He ain't say nothing. So that line of apparently what even the Michigan defensive line noticing the snapping woes that certainly contributed to that overtime loss by Alabama was a good one. I believe if you gave that same line to some master actor Patrick Stewart or Sir Laurence Olivier, they could say that exact same line in a dozen different ways. Do you make it fake concern? Do you make it angry? Do you make it laughing? There's so many ways to get under the skin. I posted that up on our CFB, and some of the thoughts on the way that trash talk could be handled was absolutely fascinating. I personally, my favorite, and this is my own, I admit, it's we've got a great sports psychology department here at Michigan. I can give you a referral. Imagine just that kind of trash talk on the line. But anyway, it was a good one, and that was what I wanted to just quickly open with. But I see John. What's going on, man? What's on your mind?
Hey man, Happy New Year. You feeling any better?
Yeah, so my laryngitis is a little bit better. I think it was a cold or virus or something. Known a few people who've been hit by it and their voice just kind of vanished. That was the day after it started for me last week. So now it's about 75% back. But it's on the mend. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, of course, man. This is a kind of a crazy week since the last time I think we both spoke. I mean, we had questionable views on Bourbon Street. We had naysayer comments. I think the biggest thing from yesterday's games. The question I had for Penix's performance, is that one of the all-time best performances in a playoff game? I mean, I cannot remember a time where I watched a quarterback played so well. And of course, not saying single handedly won the game, but I mean, beat a team that also like a Texas team that didn't feel like they were slowing down.
Yeah, and it was a masterful performance, particularly with the deep ball. I was told, for those who were in the stadium, the things you didn't see on the screen as it went up was just how perfect they were. How these throws were just getting, and I mean, for those of us watching on TV, or those of some people who were more focused in on it, they were landing in windows that were just remarkable. And part of it was certainly the more than just trio, but the receivers he's throwing into, not just Odunze, not just McMillan, but some of those star receivers over there were also making it. So it was a perfect 1-2 punch of quarterback who can make the throws. And let's set the throws aside. I mean, we saw a lot of why people thought he was a Heisman favorite early in the season. And obviously, he came in second place in the end. But we saw a lot of what kind of made him so remarkable. We saw his pocket awareness was astonishing, because it's not like Texas wasn't rushing, and there were some plays we didn't see as much of Sweat as we thought we were going to. I mean, he's a stud. It looked like it's not clear if he was a little winded. I haven't bothered to really follow up on him after the game, because obviously Texas isn't going on. But I mean, there was that sight of him warming up on the sideline in the third quarter on the bike. I wasn't sure if he was cramping up or something. Brian Murphy the second, he made himself known. I mean, because that's the second part of that 1-2 punch. He got a couple good defensive plays, even got a touchdown, if you remember that. But yeah, no, I mean, you'd go back and you'd see after a play when they do the replay, and you just get a chance to focus on Penix, and he would sense what was going on around him, and he would just get into a position where he could make that throw. And he did again and again. And it was remarkable. It's not like Ewer started off a little bit, a little bit weak. He was like 10 of 20, but then he kind of, by the second half, he was doing pretty well, I thought. So it's not like it was a terrible performance on the other side. And Ewers is certainly a respected quarterback. But man, Penix stepped up when the game mattered most. And I got to say, the thing that impressed me was I'd heard this before, not just in places like Reddit or Twitter, but like some of the folks who really follow Washington, like Brock Eward, who in addition to the ESPN stuff, he's like a Seattle radio guy. He's a big hardcore Washington guy. He said this defense, and I'm going to summarize how it's been kind of said. The Washington defense won't really get stopped. Their numbers don't really look great. They don't really get stopped when you want them to, but when you need them to, they do. They make the play, and that's what we saw with that incredible that pass deflection by Elijah Jackson to end the game. I mean, that was textbook. And you look, then you just kind of think back to that Arizona State game that everyone kind of jumps back to, and the game was decided on a pick six. Penix just kind of had an off day, and the defense suddenly comes and wins the game. So that was another aspect of this Washington program that I thought really kind of was underlined to the national audience that was able to stay up to the end of that Sugar Bowl. John, I see your hand up, and then I'm going to move on to Tom here.
Yeah, I think if I had one complaint, it's the fact that pretty much most of the East Coast probably didn't even see that second half performance by Penix, which is a shame. I'm really hoping that's something that's not going to be occurring in the future.
Yeah, I mean, so much of this has to do with the way the Rose Bowl can kind of dictate terms. For those who follow, excuse me, there's my voice coming back again. But for those who follow just sort of the decades long travails to try even get to a playoff, to even get to a championship game that wasn't locked into bowls. So much of it had to do with pleasing the Rose Bowl before we got the BCS, before we got the 14 playoff, and even before we're getting the 12-team playoff, because the Rose Bowl, being the oldest, really does consider itself above the rest. And there's a whole side story about that. I'm not going to get into it, but yeah, they're the ones that demand to get that 4 p.m. kickoff so the sun sets at 3 p.m. or whatever. Or pardon me, at the third quarter, or because time goes backwards at the beginning of that third quarter. And it's definitely pushing it to late. I know I am operating on like about 5 hours of sleep after the Sugar Bowl, and then having to get up, take kids to school because my kids' school decided to start on January 2nd. Bless them. But yeah, no, I wish we got more sleep. That's all I got to say on that. Let's see here. Oh, looks like we lost our next caller, who was actually, I'd let him up, but I'm going to let up the Water Boy. Then we'll get to Mark, pardon me, Ski Mask Murphy, then Mark. Hey, Water Boy, what's going on? For those who don't know, Water Boy was our actual reporter in the Rose Bowl. And he was on the field at the end of the game. I caught a couple of images of him, but I'm not going to share those. But I mean, he was there, like when Harbaugh hugged JJ McCarthy right there on the field. But so what's going on, man? How was that experience in the Rose Bowl?
It was pretty amazing. You really, from the outside, I often thought they kind of overhype like the Rose Bowl, but the actual game day experience really does kind of capture everything that college football fans love about college football. And to have the epic finish, that one team comes off the bench storming the celebration, the other one just in the heartbroken despair. With the crowd and the colors and those schools, it was just amazing.
Absolutely. I've been to the Rose Bowl, it was actually 20 years ago this year. So I was at the 2004 Rose Bowl. And I agree. It's, I was listening to another person describe it. I think it was Stuart Mandel. I'm not sure who I heard describing it just in the last couple of days, but the best description was it is pure college football. You walk in there, that stadium doesn't really have a whole lot of boxes. There are some, but it's just about sitting in a bowl and just taking in the game that's going on in the field. And if you're into that, there's few venues that really give you that pure experience in something that just feels, it carries a certain mystique. It's silly, I know, but when you go to it, if you're in your heart, you kind of have that soft part for college football. It warms it up real quick. But yeah, absolutely. So the coverage, though, I mean, thanks for giving. I enjoyed reading your report on it. But I mean, what were your takeaways out of this game? What were your thoughts once it wrapped up?
I'm it's I was really back and forth on it. It really felt like a game like going in where it was going to be like, okay, whatever team doesn't make any mistakes is going to win. And they were both so mistake prone. You already spoke about the Alabama center and his snapping issues and that offensive line giving up sacks like crazy. But the Michigan special teams was a different kind of hot garbage, and they almost lost the game in the most Michigan way ever on the punt and with 50 seconds left in the fourth quarter, which was their second muff punt of the day. The first one led to a touchdown for Alabama, and this one almost resulted in a safety, which would have given Alabama a 2-point lead. The only thing that I found out that was more remarkable is apparently Michigan lost in a Rose Bowl in the 70s to like Stanford on a safety, so it wouldn't have been the first time it happened to them.
If Alabama had managed to beat Michigan in that manner on a safety at the very end of the game, you kind of wished somebody would have sort of said the Hawkeyes send their regards or something like that, just to kind of rub in that wound and get that perfect circle with Iowa football coming to haunt the Big Ten right at the last possible second. But I agree. I mean, that muff punt at the beginning of the game by Smash Morgan, that set up the initial Alabama touchdown. The funny thing, I went back. I remember after that initial Alabama touchdown, short field, I watched it a couple times, and there's actually a bad snap on that play. Like, it's a low snap. And I was wondering, and I'm not sure if that low snap kind of the defensive line saw it. And this is early on in the game before they realized this is going to be like a trend. They started to like maybe move in, and that allowed that hole to open up where suddenly, the running back just gets right through, and Sanders still let him down a little bit in that backfield. But I was wondering, like, did a low snap actually help them in that situation? Little did they know it was going to keep happening again and again and again. And again, going back to that Chris Jenkins, defensive lineman from Michigan quote, is everything all right, bro? Like, I can't even imagine like that kind of smack talk that would have started to develop, especially, they had that offensive drive going, right? It was Alabama's first drive in the second half. It seemed like they were moving the ball really well. And then you just had like a pair of bad snaps that imploded that drive. And it still wasn't clear. And yet it looked like Alabama was going to do Alabama things and just kind of win a 20-13 battle. And I think that was the thing we were all wondering. Could Michigan get a real drive out of JJ McCarthy, and they did that. Cora McCarthy kind of tandem started going. You got a keeper by McCarthy followed by a deep pass to Rome Wilson, and next thing you know,
that deep pass that was tipped. We saw it on the field immediately, and I thought, oh, tipped, interception, but like Wilson jumped up in the air early and kind of just hung there and waited for the ball. And then he put a move on the defender, and all of a sudden, like, they're down inside the near the 5-yard line.
Were you on the side of the field where that happened?
So I was on. I was on that side of the end zone. I was on the 5-yard line on the where Alabama basically kind of lost on that sort of the hash mark at the end of the game, where the reception that got them down to the 3-yard line. On their third down play, on 3rd and goal from the 14, that happened like right in front of us. I actually kind of thought they might kind of crash into us for a moment there. So I was down on the field at the 5 where they played overtime, and it was the end zone that Michigan scored. The whole reason of that, it's a kind of a pretty funny story. There was a picture going around on social media of Jake Butt from the Big Ten Network on both Twitter and like Instagram, where when he made it down to the field, he was a complete like sweaty mess. And the reason for that was we were up in the press box, and they gave a crazy like announcement on like where like the media from the press box was supposed to go to get on the field, which was literally the opposite corner from where I was in the press box. And it was not the entrance that we used like for the pregame field. I got there early. I was there before the media shuttle buses, and I checked it out. I was down on the field, and I knew like post game, hey, so here's where we're going to go, and here's where we're allowed to be. But And late in the third quarter, they made an announcement that said, basically, we were sitting above section like 15 in the press box. And instead of going down to like section 15 and onto the field, or section 21 as we did pregame, they're like, you have to go to section 28, which is the opposite corner. And so there's only one elevator because, as you were saying earlier, the Rose Bowl is quite like the old stadium. It doesn't have like that kind of infrastructure. And the elevator just kind of goes down to the concourse and not the field. This isn't like SoFi Stadium where it's like these things were like, thought out. It just doesn't have the infrastructure. So most of us ended up like, should we take the steps to go down or take the elevator to go down? And there was a group of about 8 to 10 of us that went a little bit earlier than Jake Butt did to get down on the field. And we're like, do we have to go all the way to this corner? And then Nicole Allback from the Athletic, she was in that group, and at some point she's like, no, we're going to go down right through here, through the actual like stadium, through the seats, and we're just going to go down to the front row, and then we're going to cut across people that are in the front row to the steps that actually lead onto the field. And so she just marched us all down, and we just all followed her. And we got down to that front row, and we're just like, excuse me, coming through, please. I'm sorry we're getting in front of you in your front row seats here. And the security usher, like, he saw us coming, and I kind of was standing like I was about 3 back from her, and he looked at her like and went to go say like, you can't go this way, like you're gonna have to go back up and around. And she looked at him and just gave him the like, oh, this is happening, like look. And he just like was like, okay, this is happening. And he opened the gate to like let us all in and on the field. And so then I quickly made my way over to the corner where they said we were supposed to be. And I found out, like, I looked around, it was just me and Stuart Mandel and like one other. And we're like, hey, if Michigan's going to tie this game up, because this is all with like 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, the action's going to be down on the other end of the field. And so we just kind of bolted straight down. And instead of like Nicole's like, death dagger eyes looks, we all just put our heads down and ignored security trying to tell us to stop and hit our way over to that end zone. So
I love it. This is, anyone who's covered a game will tell you this is how chaotic it is. It is not what people expect. It's often not polished. It's just kind of you just kind of run into that, and sometimes it's just off the seat of your pants, figure out where you're going to go, and sometimes you end up on the wrong side of the field, and in certain situations you just can't move. You make your best call. I love it. That's a great story. I'm going to let a couple of other folks chime in and hang around, Waterboy. It's always great. I'm glad we had you down there. That must have been a hell of an experience. Both of those semifinals, were just something else. We had a guy in the Sugar Bowl as well, and both those experiences are just something else. But Ski Mask Murphy, it's been a minute. What's going on? We'll try to get to everyone who's got their hands up. Thank you so much, all of you, for your patience. But Ski Mask Murphy, what's up?
What's up is it's a great day. It's such a great day to see your school go out there and get the win against the school who's sort of like the evil empire that everybody thinks no one can stop. The team who shouldn't have been in the playoffs to begin with, that everybody said they're going to kill everyone, but they didn't do what everybody said they were going to do. But my biggest thing from takeaway from watching both games is the play calling to end the games got questionable on both sides at both games for Bama and Texas. Bama, the play call they had for Milroe, which in the moment looked like a run play, but apparently further examination it was an RPO, but it was still like one of those things where it's like, hey, you're at the 3-yard line. Why would you call a run play with a pulling guard or tackle when you've seen how we've played the whole game? And it's like you saw us have 5 on the line and then 2 behind those guys. I'm glad we won, but it's like from an aspect of like pure football, it's like you should know there are 6 guys who are about to be barreling down, and that 6 on 5 is not going to work. You just got to get out of there.
It's funny because I know they've said that, I think it was in the post game, they said, it was supposed to be that way, but it seems like it was going to be run, it was an RPO, but we had a low snap, and there's a couple good screenshots of how low that snap went. And that little delay was all it took. And then, panic moment, and Milroe just runs it up, and he ran right into the monster.
Yeah, in the moment from, the TV angle, it looked like it hit the ground, or like from like the back judge angle, you can see it didn't hit the ground. But it's one of those things for me is like, what they showed in terms of like the running back motion, and I was like, I know this concept they're running. This is a very good play to call, which is based if for those who may have not seen the play or saw the play, the running back's beside him where he motions out towards the side of two wide receivers. More than likely, they were going to run backs on a swing route. The slot receivers just on a crosser to basically clear out space for the outside receiver to run a slant, and then basically those three combine to like create a spacing problem, and then he gets to whoever's the quickest. But the pulling guard sort of lets you know is like they didn't draw it up to be a pure pass play. That was bad. Then Texas Washington. I don't know what Texas called up with their luck of a guy being injured and getting a chance to drive downfield one more time. But those last four play calls were questionable that Texas drew up. I mean, two of those are like dump downs instead of flat to the running back with like 25 seconds left from like the 30-yard line. That wasn't a good play call. I mean, the last play was the right play call, but Ewers didn't put the ball in the right place for the wide receiver to make a better catch. But the play calling from both coaches in the game just wasn't good.
Yeah, that ending to the Sugar Bowl was one of the most remarkable sequences I think anyone expected. We were just it definitely erased the whole earlier conversation of like, what if that second muff punt by Michigan ended up resulting in resulting in a safety or something. But then we got that entire, and it was such a unique situation. I mean, not the most unique situation, but just for the circumstances, Dylan Johnson, and I get why they ran it. I don't have any. I'm not in any way saying they shouldn't have run it. They were trying to just ice the game right then and there. They were trying to end it by running it on third down. He re-aggravates an injury in his foot from what they said after the game. And the current prognosis is there was no fracture. He may be up for the championship game on Monday, but we'll set that aside for a second. But the whole sequence of that, the injury, that injury forces a timeout, which, by the way, I think that was the rule from when teams were getting upset, especially the no huddle offenses. You can't run. They wanted people were faking cramps, so they started to do the 10-second runoff. But the 10-second runoff is up to the other team. So the interesting thing is when Dylan went down with an injury, I remember the refs asked, Sarkisian, do you want to run off 10 seconds? He's like, no, I do not want to run off 10 seconds in this circumstance. So it ended up giving them the ball again. And yeah, it was the whole sequence is fascinating because again, Washington has another kind of bad moment where they I don't know what their coverage team was thinking. And they interfere with the kick catch. They get kick catching interference, so they add some yardage to that. You see some good plays by Ewers initially, to at least get the ball moving. I mean, and being efficient with time. And then they get a couple of plays at the end. They could have got more. The whole thing is like they could have got more plays out of that, more shots at that end zone. And then, as I said at the beginning, we saw exactly what the Washington defense apparently does. It's like they're not great, but when you need them to be, they'll make the play. And then Elijah Jackson, who I remember earlier got burned on one of the plays earlier in the half, he made the play. He made the textbook pass. He knocked down that pass, and that was just an absolutely remarkable game. But yeah, imagine if Texas had won. I mean, Texas fans obviously would have been thrilled, and I'm sure at this point the SEC would have said, "Hey, look, they're going to be joining us next season. This is an SEC victory again." But my goodness, it would have been crushing.
Bobak, this is one of the things I actually wanted to bring up. I believe they need to make a rule change there, because in the future, if that happens again, in the national championship game, whoever that injured player is, their teammates are going to pick him up and take him off the field, and he could get injured even worse, because ultimately, that should have been paused, and then they should have just reset the 25 and ran the 25 seconds off at least, because you're really risking serious player safety injury the next time that scenario comes up.
Yeah, no, I agree. Ski Master Murphy, I see your hand up, and then I'll get to Mark. And we'll, again, got your hand up. I will try to get, if you've got your request, I'll try to get to all of you. I promise.
Well, the injury rule for the end of the game, it's like a weird sequence of a jumbling of rules that go together. The only reason I know this, strangely enough, is we're playing NCAA Road to Glory mode on the PS2 era, where you had to actually take classes, quote unquote. And the rule is strangely set up where it's basically like that first player injury within the last 2 minutes is always going to be a timeout, regardless of whether teams have timeouts or not. It's a timeout with, they get the choice to get the second run off. But if a second injury timeout occurs with no one having a timeout, then it gets in like this weird, like the ball gets moved and stuff like that. So it's one of those things where it's like they got to like rewrite a bunch of rules to rewrite that one rule, which they probably should do.
Absolutely. There's a lot of rules that gotta get rewritten. Hey, Mark, what's going on? It's good to hear from you. I know you're a Wyoming fan, and that was a amazing ending to the Craig Bowl era.
Yeah, baby. Honestly, there is not a more like Craig Bowl type win that it could have been had. I mean, he waited till the last minute to win it, just barely. Like that is the most Craig Bowl football game ever. So I don't know. Kudos to him. Good for him going out on a good point. But
for those who didn't see it, the Arizona Barstool Bowl, it ended with a walk-off field goal for the Wyoming Cowboys to win 16-15. And Craig Bowl had announced that was going to be his retirement game, and he goes out a winner. And what a way to wrap that up. I mean, he's been an absolutely fascinating coach. I mean, back at North Dakota State, obviously, he has history that goes back to his ties to Nebraska and all of that stuff, which is why he got some of those early players for, oh, God, what was that? Oh, man, I remember he had an amazing DB who came to, like, I'm not joking, like 3 Mountain West media days in a row. I forgot his name. I think he was a Nebraska guy. Do you know this one, Mark? Who am I thinking of? Oh, my God. Man, I'm so sorry because he was on the same. Oh, man. I'll look it up. But what else is on your mind?
I know what you were thinking of. Gosh, I can't. It's funny. I had 2 topics actually, but since I'm a Michigan guy, I just have to respond. I hate to say this. I don't want to be a bad guy or whatever, but it's funny to me to hear a Michigan fan talk about how Bama is the evil team. You literally got caught cheating, and historically, you were the evil team, man. Like, anyway, it's symbolic of how poor you've done, with all due respect. Sorry to say that, but sorry. A couple thoughts on this season, though. I'm curious if you think about this. I don't know if it's just me or if I'm getting older, or maybe it's from a team that feels pretty pushed to the side or whatever. But I mean, great playoff games for sure. Super interesting. But my God, the bowl games in general, they just seem increasingly meaningless, and I find that very frustrating as a college football fan. I'm curious what you think. Is it just me? They just seem like kind of meaningless exhibition games, and I am such a college football degenerate. I love it. I love the game, and it breaks my heart just a little bit. I don't like it.
First of all, I want to say it was Andrew Wingard. I looked it up. It was Dewey.
Oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah. He was. First of all, he was one of the best guys to interview. He was such an honest to goodness, like good guy. I talked to him several times and always. But all right, setting that aside, he's on the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I mean, he's made it. He's still out there. He's good. So
love that guy.
Yeah. So, but going back to what the whole I've heard different theories on it. First of all, I'm really looking forward to seeing the final numbers on how the polls did. And actually, going back to, I love that reference you made to Michigan also being kind of regarded, especially this season, as kind of the bad guy. And I had that thought too when it was brought up. But the good news is when you get those 2 teams together, Alabama and Michigan, and I think just the general rise in college football TV ratings this whole season, they had like 22.6 million viewers, which made it the most watched semifinal in 6 years, which again, that's a tremendous number for a semifinal. And what was more remarkable too, pardon me. No. And that was a combined semifinal. The Rose Bowl 0.2. And so again, that actually was by far the most watched semifinal since actually the first year, the 2014 semifinal Rose Bowl game, which was the Oregon Florida State game, as I recall. So more people are watching it. My favorite response to why the Rose Bowl did so well is because it was the haters' Super Bowl because everyone just wanted to see one of the two teams lose. Some more than others, but that was definitely more compelling. It was the play haters bowl, however you want to look at it. But going back to the other bowls, I've kind of talked about it a little bit on and off in the last couple of weeks, but I think we're seeing an interesting move of the bowls towards what they originally were. And I say that because I'm talking like before. I guarantee you just about anyone who'd be listening on Twitter would have been alive, or at least following college football because, the polls used to not count the bowl games in terms of determining a champion until the 60s for the AP poll and then the early 70s for the coaches poll, which also explains some of the really bizarre split titles you sometimes see if you don't know that. So the bowl games are just kind of like, fun exhibitions. Guys get together, you can play an extra game. It doesn't really matter how serious people are taking it. And I always wondered the minor bowls, I think they benefit if they shift that way. Right now we just saw the Cadillac of the Rolls Royce, however you want to put it, like the pinnacle of absurd minor bowl games. And that was the Pop-Tarts Bowl. They absolutely figured out how you may get people excited about complete utter nonsense. The memes, the silliness, the people were into the game, watching all the confused players, trying to figure out what to do with this giant Pop-Tart that came out of the of that big toaster. The argument I thought was the most compelling is the games that are going to suffer next year. And which really is just an extension of this year, is the teams that were maybe in that 15 to 20 group, where they could have made the 12-team playoff that starts next year, but they're the ones that are going to be less motivated. But then you're going to get teams like Texas State in their first ever bowl. What do? They drink SMU Stadium dry. And then, they're playing for their lives. This is like the best thing that's ever happened. So I think you're going to see, you're going to see the smaller bowls and the ones that have a lot of G5 teams that just aren't necessarily, were never, ever going into the season expecting to go into the playoff. Those teams are going to be absolutely, they're going to have fun. Those bowls are going to be good. The playoff teams are going to obviously be really into it. And that second tier might be the one where we'll see a little bit of weirdness. But even then, we saw, for example, the type of games that might be affected would be the Holiday Bowl. We watched Miller Moss certainly didn't take the game off. Holy crap. He may have messed up USC's transfer plans because suddenly you have a guy who goes out there and just balls out. I could not believe that. And, Georgia clearly was motivated enough to go in and play that whole Florida State Georgia game.
Yeah, that was interesting. Yeah.
Because, it's like Kirby Smart can keep his guys into the game. I don't know. It was a really special situation for Florida State, so I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt there. But that was just kind of like, both of you guys really thought you had a shot at being in the playoff. And Georgia kept playing that way, and Florida State kind of imploded. Especially, and there's a lot of factors there. I know that. I'm not trying to. That is an oversimplification, but damn, that was something to see. I'll say that. But
no, you're totally right.
You got teams like Mizzou just going out there and making it work. And
where
Oregon,
the hell did
Bo
they
Nix.
come from?
Yeah. Well, Mizzou's been there the whole time. I just think no one expected Ohio State's offense to opt out. I think that was the big shocker there. And maybe Kyle McCord was like, see, I have some value. I told you guys, I have some value.
But Mizzou was picked to finish second to last in the SEC East?
Yeah, they are one of the most remarkable. They are absolutely one of the most remarkable stories. And I see Fack out there, and I can't wait to get to him because he's a big Mizzou guy. I'm looking forward to hearing from him on that. But no, absolutely. But yeah, so I think we're going to see that. I think there will be those second tier right out of the playoff bowls. Might see a little bit of wonkiness because some teams are just going to be frustrated. But I'm hoping for more, man. I'm hoping this expanded playoff and just will keep it exciting. And then, there's always going to be those silly teams getting stuck in the Bahamas, and you're just, which with Charlotte, of course, this year, they're just going to be having the time of their lives and playing ridiculous games that are meaningless but enjoyable.
Now, you didn't mention the Duke's Mayo, Bo, but I think they've got an excellent social media presence. I think they deserve to be on your list as well.
They do. I'm going to say the Charlotte Sports Foundation. There's a guy there, Miller Yoho, and we're friends with him. We've actually had him on a Twitter space before. I think they were the ones that were the head of the curve. And it was Miller specifically. He actually, as I recall, for a while, I think he may be working for them a while, but even when he went on and did another job, they actually kept him on for the bowl game social media because he was so good at it. And they were like, because that was when we finally started to see the stuffiness start to leave. It's college football. It's college football. And finally, we're starting to see some of the more of that in the last decade, the more of the college fun, the silliness part of it. But my goodness, I see like 3 hands up, and then I want to also get to some of these folks in the line. But
hey, one more thing, man. You have absolutely been killing it on Twitter. That just terrific Twitter follow. You've been awesome. That's all.
Man, thanks so much, Mark. I appreciate it. There's
Love
like
it.
5 of us
Love
that
what
tweet
you do.
regularly, but I appreciate it. Thanks again.
Yeah.
All right. So
Thanks,
I saw
man.
a bunch of hands go up. Ski Masks, Murphy, then John, then the Water Boy. Then I'm going to get to Thack, and then I will promise I'll try to get to all of you. Have your hands up or request it anyway. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I want doing some perusing on the internet. I don't know if it's exactly true, but the prevailing thing right now is saying that the Pop Tarts Bowl mascot, the guy performing used to be Benny the Bull for the Chicago Bulls. So they did a good job by hiring a professional. But I wanted to get on what you were talking about with like the bowl games and where they're going, because I think we talked about this the last time I was up here, and I looked into it as like, everybody thinks, the small bowls are gonna sort of go away and try to figure out what they're doing. But I looked into it, and I don't think the bowl game's actually going to go anywhere as long as they make money for ESPN. And I looked into it. ESPN is basically all of bowl season to like an extreme amount for like I did the numbers and it's like, all right, this including the playoffs and the Celebration Bowl, there are 43 bowl games. Fox has one, CBS has one, and then Barstool/CW had one. All the 40 others are shown on ESPN ABC. And then on top of that, 17 of the bowl games are actually owned and operated by ESPN itself.
Oh, yeah. ESPN Events. It's based in Charlotte.
Yeah, so that was something to find out that is like, I don't think bowl games are going anywhere as long as it makes ESPN money for Disney. So I don't know what the small bowl games are going to do. I don't think they care about opt-outs, even though it got pretty severe this year. I think it's going to keep going.
Yeah, I agree. If the ratings are good, they're going to keep going. They make money off of them, and it's interesting too because there's a lot of the ones that were created for television, and then there are the classics that are not necessarily the biggest names, but like you got the Sun Bowl, the Holiday Bowl, the Independence Bowl. These are more the old school. Like no, the whole community's coming together to make you want to go to Shreveport or San Diego. Who wins that battle? But it's a bit of all of that. John, what your hands up, Water Boy, and then let's get to Thack.
Yeah, just talking about the bowls. I mean the Pop-Tart Bowl is got to be one of the most memorable things I think I've seen in a long time. And I hope all future bowls have edible mascots in the future. I want full tilt edible mascots. I don't care if it's sponsored by an oil company. I just want everything to be edible in the future because that's some of the best television I think you could ever ask for in a million years. So I want full tilt silliness. I bought into what you were selling the last several weeks, sir. So bravo to you.
As you said, any bowl mascot's edible with the right mindset. I'm waiting to see some football because imagine you're a senior, 5th-year senior, you're about to finish, you're not going to the NFL, you're on television. Why not just go take a bite out of a random mascot? What are they going to do? Kick you out of the game? Oh no, I can't play the first half of the next season. I'm not even going to be here, man. I mean, just go take a bite. What's going to harm? You should have got a big mascot costume on. I'm not saying like go and kill somebody. I'm saying like take a bite. I mean, there was actually, oh my God, I don't know if some of you guys saw this. There was a photo of like one of the players licking the actual costume mascot, like near the face, and it almost looked like the person in the mascot Pop-Tart costume was trying to like, I don't know, kiss him back. It was kind of hard to say, but that was one of the best photos. Was watching a player like trying to actually lick the K-State player trying to lick the actual Pop-Tart costume. And again, that was awesome. That's a silliness. I mean, I remember what it was like when it was 18 to 20, whatever. That sort of silliness. That's what it's all about. Let's hear Waterboy. I know you wanted to add something, and then I got back up here.
Yeah, I wanted to add exactly to that topic. For fans. Like USC fans, they shouldn't be upset that like Caleb Williams opted out and their best wide receiver opted out and think of it like as the last game of the season. It should be embraced for being a potential sneak preview for next season because Miller Moss was like absolutely tremendous and if Caleb Williams just played there, it would be, nice last game or whatever, like for his USC career. But now it's like, hey, next season, Miller Moss, is he real, or, like, what is this kid that grew up as a USC fan, going to be? Is he going to be that top quarterback as USC heads into the Big Ten? So I think if they embrace, or we as fans embrace more of it's like a one game kind of like one off potential sneak preview for next season, we'd be a lot happier than being upset about like all the opt outs. And the only other thing I wanted to add on was the Holiday Bowl. Their social media team, they did a pretty fine job too. I mean, the
Yeah,
Pop-Tart
and
Bowl
by
brought
the
it
way,
to
for
a new
those who don't
level.
know, Waterboy was also our reporter at the Holiday Bowl in the press box and on the field for that one.
It was literally less than a week ago, and it feels like a month and a half ago at this point.
Yeah, no, that was great. And I did not know about that eggnog pour until the photos started coming in of the fact that they dunked Lincoln Riley at the end with eggnog, which honestly looked a little weird, somehow more weird than the mayo. But that was great. You got a good shot of it.
Wait till I get him to autograph the picture for you.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. Oh goodness. All right, hey Thak, you've been super patient, man, and I know I've been hoping to hear from you after the Cotton Bowl. How are things going, man?
Things are going fantastic, Bobak. I haven't been on here a while. Tried to stay off the rat poison for a little bit as we were heading towards the back end of the season. Man, it was nuts. I attended live. Jerry Jones knows how to put on a show. I've been very critical of the NFL. I'm from St. Louis. They stole our NFL team twice. But man, it was a gorgeous venue. I couldn't be more happier with the result, other than it looked like an Iowa game out there for a second. I mean, and you look at the preseason or the game. You obviously don't have McCord and Marvin Harrison Jr. for Ohio State, but you look at that roster, man. They've got 20 more, 5-stars than us. So it was a great win, regardless. And well, to be honest, too, I think if one player opt out of the game, and that's your whole offense, I think you got serious problems elsewhere. But I digress on that. Happy for the season. Happy for Coach Drinkwitz. I was a real big supporter of him when people were trying to call for his head a little bit at the end of last season. And the funny thing is, I think Mark brought it up, is picked to finish second to last in the SEC East. And you think about that in the preseason, and I've been calling it probably two-ish years now on the show, and I was very critical of the team the past 2 years, but this year I had a lot of hope that defense was returning 80% of its starters, and I don't think anybody quite expected the meteoric rise of the quarterback Brady Cook, or the Burlsworth Trophy Award winner Cody Schrader, leading rusher in the SEC. So the nice burst on offense was definitely a really good sight to see. I think that came from Kirby Moore, the offensive coordinator hire, first-year offensive coordinator at Missouri, coming out of Fresno State. I think it was a fantastic season. It's about all you can ask for. I think I said on here, like a long time ago, I said, as Missouri, all you can hope for to be is the Iowa of the SEC. Every once in a while you have one of these really good seasons, and well, we just did, and I'm excited for it, and excited for the team. The team next year. We'll see what ends up happening, but I know there's 2 really great games on last night, so and that I'm sure you guys want to get more talking about. So I digress here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Thak. And yeah, I can't wait to talk more about how Mizzou's looking, especially in the offseason, because I'm just glancing at that 2024 schedule. They're going to definitely, almost certainly go 4-0, because they got Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, Vandy, and then at Texas A&M, which is kind of Elko's going to be just starting over there. Then UMass.
At UMass too. It's not a home game.
Well,
yet.
My goodness,
that was our previous AD was a moron. They brought in this gal Desiree Reed Francois out of UNLV, and she's been an absolute hero for the fan base The fans really like her. She's made quite a bit of fan-centric decisions that people have been asking for years. So hopefully that we also had a football game at Memphis last year that was going to be at Memphis that she ended up buying out to play in St. Louis. That was one I attended at the old Rams.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah, it ended up being really cool. So I'm hoping she'll end up buying that one out for at least a home game.
UMass could use the money, so they'll probably come up with some way to. It's just so funny that you guys are playing Boston College at home, but going to UMass. It's usually the. I've been to a game at BC. BC is a fun place to see a game.
I traveled there when it was, so our previous AD, again, the moron, scheduled home and homes too with Boston College, which I'm not opposed to, but it doesn't quite make much sense for us. I'd rather schedule an out of conference team that's a little bit closer, but I ended up traveling to that, and it was a great place to watch a game, but it was certainly strange, and we ended up losing, I think.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, I'm there. I've watched the fans storm the field at BC because my team lost. So I've been in that situation, so I hear you. Well, thanks so much, Thak. It's always great hearing.
No
from
problem.
You,
have a good one. Bobak.
Yeah, take care. All right, I'm letting you up, Tim. Let's see. Tim's going up here. I'll try to get to everyone who's made a request. Tim, what's going on?
Hey, gentlemen. Good evening. Great. And ladies, good evening. Great show. I'm really enjoying this. I'll be back for sure. It's my first time in this space. I first want to say congratulations to Michigan and Washington and all the fans that are listening in this space. Congratulations to you. As a Texas fan, yes, I'm heartbroken naturally, but you cannot deny the brilliance of Michael Penix. It was one of the best postseason performances I can remember personally. And I know Texas secondary was their Achilles heel, but Penix was unbelievable. So I just, there's nothing you can say. You just tip your cap to them. They were the better team. They were more sound than Texas, and they made more plays. That being said, I wanted to hear your thoughts on Steve Sarkisian. And as a Texas fan, naturally, I have my finger on the pulse a little bit more. But this game reminded me of 2022 against Oklahoma State, in which Texas was gashing Oklahoma State on the ground. I think they were averaging over 10 yards per carry, yet Quinn Ewers finished the game with almost 50 pass attempts, and Texas lost that game. And so what are your thoughts on Sarkisian and his adjustments or lack thereof? Because it felt like early in this game, I think it was after the second possession, to me, it was painfully obvious that Washington was not going to get beat deep. They weren't going to give up splash plays in the passing game. They were basically daring you to just run the ball. And I think Sark was a little impatient. What do you think?
It's interesting too, because I know Sarkisian has a preference to really map out his, like, an incredible number of plays. Most, you hear about coaches mapping out the first, dozen or so. He goes up to like 40, apparently, where he goes into a game and there's 40 plays you're just going to run, and that's a plan. And I don't know if he went quite so deep here, and I'm sure he's not an idiot. He knows to make adjustments if things are really looking terrible. But I wondered how much of that came into play because, CJ Baxter just looked relentless early on in that game. And I'm like, okay, it does not look like Washington quite knows how to answer this. And I mean, again, Washington defense had a couple of surprises. I mean, I think now people are familiar with Braylon Trice because he was just being a wrecking crew back there at certain times, disrupting plays. But I was surprised that Baxter wasn't getting more. And then, obviously, Jaden Blue had a lot of great runs. I was really impressed by that pair running backs because obviously, the starter goes out. Everyone was wondering who was going to step up. It was Jonathan Brooks, obviously. Losing him was a big loss, but between Baxter and Blue, things were looking pretty good. And then, exactly. And it was funny too. I could almost say the reverse side. There were moments. I can't remember at what point in the game it was, but it certainly came to mind when in the wackiness of the end of the game. But they kept running Dylan Johnson up the middle in this one sequence, and I'm like, why do you keep trying this? Like, you're running up against the Texas, that Texas D line. And they are absolutely, this is a drive where they're not letting it happen. And I'm like, is Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb, are they trying to demoralize Texas early on? I mean, you get that strategy. You try to break somebody what they're supposedly good at. But the problem is, between Sweat and Murphy, they can get you. So, and then when he wore out, I mean, I don't know, wore out might be the wrong way to put it, but when he got injured on that final drive, for Washington. I'm like, oh my gosh, was it really worth continually throwing them at that defensive line of Texas, which is ferocious? And yet again, I know exactly what you mean, especially with Ewers going 10 of 20 to start the game, and then he seemed to find a groove, and they seemed to make those adjustments because that second half, Texas certainly looked a little bit better. I mean, I definitely felt the second half Texas seemed to try and go with what was working better. And I mean, the fact that they kept first of all, I just want to say this on the outset too. One of my favorite comments I read in kind of the Reddit stuff, that the post games, was this one guy, this UCF fan. It's freaking Harry. He wrote after both games were done, Michigan fans died of a heart attack, Alabama fans died of a heart attack, Texas fans died of a heart attack, Washington fans died of a heart attack. The neutral fans feasted. Um, but that's exactly what it was. I mean, we went into this. I mean, come on, we all went. I'm not alone. I know I'm no way alone to say everyone went into these semifinals going like, okay, if you can get aside past the FSU stuff, like any four of these teams could win it all. And I mean, we had both games go to the final play, one in overtime, one in regulation. And my goodness, like I still don't know, who. This is not a game. This is not a season where it's clear who's going to win next week. But Tim, I know your hand's still up there, and I want to let you get a response on this.
Yeah, thank you. I'll say one last thing. I love Sarkisian, and he's a program builder, and it's undeniable that he does have Texas on a strong trajectory. That being said, my observation is he has a tendency, and maybe this is unfair to him, but I think he calls a game from an offensive coordinator's lens too often. And he needs to step back and think about more of a macro, or thinking about like from a head coach's lens. Like, to me, as an armchair quarterback, the best way to stop Penix is to keep him on the sideline. Washington was basically, I saw a lot of cover 4 quarters, things like that. Like, we needed to be more methodical. Texas is. They need to be more methodical. Just take what they're giving you. And it's not the end of the world because Penix is on the sideline. And then you got to trust that your defense is going to make a play. You're going to make a play on special teams. You're going to create some splash plays later in the game. Just be more patient. That was kind of the frustrating thing. But like I said, hey, now that I'm emotionally sober, I have to say, you know what? Michael Penix, congratulations. You balled out. Washington, congratulations. You played a really good game. And you know what? I think this national championship, I mean, the two styles couldn't be more different, and that's going to make for a great chess match, and I can't wait. Thank you.
Tim, I just want to say you sounded a lot like I did as a USC fan after I watched Vince Young in 2005. I'm like, dang it, he's just good. What can you do? When you watch that, and I'm still furious that Reggie Bush tried a lateral on a meaningless play that was totally pointless and handed the game back to Texas. But that to me was a bigger deal. But I don't want to go back that many years quite yet. Let's see here. I got someone else who's been really patient. I'll try to get to everybody, but Mage Ingrid 2. I think I'm doing that right. Thanks for your patience. Feel free to unmute.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Hello, sir. It's my first time speaking on this discussion. First thing, that was a crazy night last night. I saw both of these games, and oh my gosh, I know everybody was nervous during the last play of these two games. It was just beautiful and crazy because I think I scared my mom because at the end of the Michigan game, because I literally was jumping up and down when they stopped Miro on the 4th and goal play. I'm like, oh my gosh, Michigan won. That defense was crazy. And second thing, I went to the Celebration Bowl in Atlanta, and that was a good game as well.
Absolutely. And first of all, I just want to say I love the excitement in your voice because that's exactly what it's all about. That's what makes college football so fun. I mean, as a neutral fan, you can walk into some of these games and just get so into it. It's so hype. And it's for those who watch maybe a bit, are dedicated to the pros. I mean, who don't really get why we love college football. It's like silly stuff happens sometimes. These guys are still, not all of these guys are going to the NFL. There's a lot of them are not. And you get these wacky plays, these wacky motions, things that you just don't see. But I'm glad he brought up the Celebration Bowl. That's always a great game. That's like the game that in my mind now kicks off. I mean, at first I was kind of like it felt a little manufactured. I remember when they brought it up, it was kind of ESPN approached the SWAC and the MEAC and they said, would you guys be interested in sending your champion instead of the playoff, send him to the Celebration Bowl? You guys get a good check out of it. And they did. It's been a money maker for them because the FCS playoff is not a real moneymaker for the teams, especially if you don't go all the way. It's just kind of, you end up paying a lot to just do road games and all of that stuff that may not go anywhere. But it's always exciting. And, I'm a little surprised, only because Florida AMU, we've been talking a lot about their head coach. He was always up for positions around the nation. And now he's going to be a position coach at Duke next season. I hope it means he will get away. I mean, because anyone who hires him knows that he's absolutely he's gunning for an FBS head coaching position. But I hope he gets it because it's well deserved because what he's been doing at FAMU has been absolutely something else.
Oh yeah, them FAMU fans, they were everywhere. They're just everywhere in the stadium. I'm like, what is this fan base? And that halftime, man, that FAMU band, that's super big too. I'm like, what is this? This is crazy HBCU stuff. I felt bad for Howard because that band was so tiny compared to FAMU. I'm like, oh, this is sad. And that game really was good. Oh, also, I'm a Michigan and Texas fan, so I'm happy and sad at the same time. But I'm glad Michigan's going to the championship.
Hey, one of them made it through. Now you don't have the stress of having to watch them both face off, in the title game, because then it gets really stressful. Then you have to really kind of get in the crunch time. It was so funny. Somebody who was attending the Celebration Bowl told me, because it's obviously it's in Mercedes-Benz Stadium right there in Atlanta. The convention center is right there. Apparently, the convention center was having like some esports tournament, so they were walking into the stadium, and they were like, at first I'm like, wow, the Celebration Bowl is really just pulling in a really wild audience. Like these groups of people don't all seem to be college football fans. Let alone going to an HBCU championship. But it was like, oh no, there was an esports event that was happening next door at the same time at the Celebration Bowl. So all these different fans from totally different things, and some crossover, of course. But I mean, that one that made me chuckle trying to imagine that. Oh my goodness,
it was called DreamHack. I was gonna go if I didn't go to the Celebration Bowl, and then also there was college basketball that day too in State Farm Arena, the CBS Sports Classic. So I know Atlanta made some good money off of that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, Atlanta's an absolute sports capital and just entertainment. It's like entertainment capital of the South in a lot of ways. It's interesting too, listening to the fact that you're a fan of Michigan and Texas. It reminded me of, there's a friend of the family, and I'm just helping this guy because he's a friend of my in-laws. He not related by blood or anything, but he's an international student coming to the United States. This is his freshman year of college. And last year they asked me, like, hey, Bobak, where do you think he should go to college? And they told me what schools he got into. And they were all three of his final schools were top universities. You couldn't go wrong. And he was, I kid you not, he was choosing between Michigan, Texas, and Washington. And I told him, he ended up picking Michigan. But I was like, these are all good teams. You can't go wrong. You're going to get the full college experience, Maybe Washington being in Seattle might be a little less of the traditional college experience because I went to university in big cities. It's not quite the same, but you can't, pick can you take snow? Then you can maybe go Michigan. If you can't stand snow, Texas is definitely it. And I mean, what are the odds, especially because the Rose Bowl was decided first, the last three teams competing for the national championship are that kid's last three schools. I mean, you can't, I honestly, if Michigan wins out, I just say it's that kid's, it's that kid. He was the reason why. And, be conspiratorial.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
How many college football stadiums sit by a body of water? Do you know how many?
Like, are you saying by a river or by
not by any body of water? It don't matter if it's like a river or anything.
Boy, that's a tough question. Some of it, and I'm actually going to get into the theory I have here. Some of it has to do with the fact that some of the historic stadiums are built in maybe places where if it floods, no big deal. It's a stadium, it's not houses. But some of it's also just historically, quirks of land availability, so much of that. But I don't know. That would be a very time consuming project. But I can think of several.
I just know Neyland Stadium sits by Think of River, and
Yep.
Washington sits by the Puget Sound, I think. Thanks
Yeah,
very much.
it's the lake on the other side, but you're right. It's on the water too. Both of them have their sailgating. So does Baylor when they built their new McLean Stadium. They're on some kind of man-made creek or whatever, so they're
I
right
didn't
off
know
of
they were by
that. But
water.
and LSU Stadium isn't that far from the Mississippi River, although it's not really quite on it. It's really right by it. But yeah, no, there's some out there, and that would be a fun project. If you get into let me be honest, if you get to D2 and D3, there are some stadiums that are literally right on the water, like stands on one side, water on the other, and they have amazing views, like tiny schools, like New York Maritime, like Division III programs, where you just are like, this stadium is actually kind of insane when you look up like some of these, especially if the small college has Maritime in its name. I guarantee you this stadium's got a set up that you're just going to be blown away by. Hey, Ski Mask Smurfy, I see your hand up. And then I'm going to get to another caller because I want to get as many folks as I can.
Oh, I was gonna say for that list, you could probably go to the Sickos Committee Twitter account and go through all their images because they made a list of a lot of interesting things this year. I'm pretty sure
We got to
stadiums
do
with
that.
water
We got to get
probably
them
on
like
that.
the marine stadiums or something like that. My all time stadium for, if you like water, is, and I don't know if it's still there in Singapore. It was a floating stadium, and it's the size of a regulation soccer pitch, so it could probably hold a football game with just
Yeah, I
like a
know exactly
10.
what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's called the Float. I know it's called the Float, but it's got a 10,000 seat like grandstand on one side, and the background is like all those really famous skyscrapers in Singapore. That one that looks like three towers with a surfboard across the top. You would have seen it if you saw Crazy Rich Asians and movies like that, or if you just like travel photos. But yeah, that would be my choice. That's the ultimate on the water stadium, and oh my god, how many balls would go into that lake? It would be absolutely ridiculous. But let's see here. We've got Scorpio. What's going on?
Hi, I've been meaning to talk. I was very blown away by the CFP semifinal slate. Honestly, I've watched college football a bit since what, 7 years ago. So this 6 years ago. So when Tua Tagovailoa connected with Devontae Smith, and I can say, as an unbiased fan, it's probably one of the best slates we've ever had in a pretty long time. And if the final is very close, like 7 points, 3 points, 1 point, we might be talking about potentially the best college football slate ever.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I'm with you on that. If these semifinals were exceptional. Last year's were good too, but these were way more like strength on strength kind of. You didn't feel like one team just had a really bad day like Michigan did with JJ McCarthy's errors last season against TCU. This was just like, if the teams were making errors, both teams were making errors. And, it just felt like we were seeing the full force of at least both programs against each other. But Washington versus Michigan, I know the line isn't really big right now, especially now that Dylan Johnson may be able to play. That was like the big factor. If Dylan Johnson can't play, I really don't know who the backup is going to be. That Tybo Rogers, who's actually from my hometown, and I think I just mangled his first name. But Rogers, I know he's from my hometown of Bakersfield, but he wasn't entirely impressive to me, and I don't know if he normally plays in that position or how they like to play him. But I hope if they can get Dylan Johnson back, I'm really looking forward to seeing how these teams stack up against each other because it's different styles. The Michigans, I'm going to give a slight prediction because we don't have a show before the next one. Maybe we'll do a show before. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm going to be in Houston. I'm actually flying to Houston late tomorrow night to be in town to cover the game from the press box and NRG Stadium this Monday. But I'm wondering, I'm leaning towards I could see a situation where no one can stop Washington's offense. They're going to still score points. They're not going to score like 50, but they're going to score like 30 easily. If they could score 28, I don't know if Michigan can quite keep up with that. That's the one concern in the game. Can Michigan slow down Penix? I don't know. I don't think anyone really. I mean, he slows himself down. I don't know if they'll be the ones to do it. And then if it turns into that kind of firefight, I mean, I'm going to say again, JJ McCarthy had a really amazing drive at the end of that game against Alabama, against a defense that was quite good, probably a better defense than what they saw, what they're going to see against Washington. And certainly Michigan has done that again against strong defenses. They got Penn State's defense. They got Iowa's defense, which is all they have. And then they had the Ohio State defense. And again, Alabama's defense, they can score, but again, so can Washington, and they can do a lot. And that X factor, which is Michael Penix and his ability to toss that ball. I mean, I cannot wait to see how Will Johnson does against. Sanders still. I can't wait to see how he does. But the problem is, Washington's got like an exceptional third and fourth receiver as well. Their third and fourth receivers are like the ones that start on other teams. They just happen to have some guys ahead of them, like Polk and Odunze, where it's just like, where do you even begin? So that's my thought on that. That's where I'm going on that. I'm very curious to see how that stacks up. That's going to be the critical one. I see one other request. I'll just let you up, and then I'm not kicking anyone off. So again, if we want to also chime in, you can always raise your hand. But Caleb, I'm going to let you up here. This is fun. What a fun conversation. I still can't believe we're almost done with this season. Just amazing. By the way, we're going to have another person reporting from the FCS title game this weekend, because they actually play it on a weekend day rather than Monday night. So we can set that aside for a second. But Montana versus South Dakota State. The thing that struck me after watching Liberty, just finally, everyone thought Liberty was going to implode. I mean, there was just no way. We were talking about them at the beginning of the season. Like, I'm a big fan of the Phil Steele's preseason magazine. He's been a guest here a couple of times, only because I love him so much. And I reached out to them. It's like, would he love to talk to us? But he ranked their schedule 133 out of 133. New Mexico State's surprise season. And again, I'm sad to see Jerry Kill had to medically retire again. That's how he left Minnesota. But he led them to a 10-win season, just insane for New Mexico State. You guys don't understand. If you don't know the history of college football, and I'm not saying this is a curmudgeon, but that is a miracle for New Mexico State. But other than that, I mean, Liberty didn't really get challenged, and Oregon, with Bo Nix still playing, absolutely put them out. And for those who may not have noticed, they have a good quarterback. Liberty has a good quarterback, and Caden Salter, who was originally, I believe, at Auburn, or he was at an SEC school, but he's entered the transfer portal, so he may end up on another team. And to be fair, Jamie Chadwell's had that happen before, where Grayson McCall, when they were at Coastal, entered the portal and stayed. Of course, that was after, actually, what am I saying? It was after Chadwell left. And but I just want to say, Caden Salter, he's going to be out there potentially for another team. That'll be an interesting one. But I want to let Caleb talk, and then Scorpio, I see your hand up, and we'll get to you again. Caleb, what's going on? You've been super patient, man.
Oh, no. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it. I love what you guys are doing, and I have a good time following and watching your tweets. I get a good kick out of it. I appreciate you bringing up Liberty, because I want to talk about that. I do some coverage for Fresno State, and the big talk around here is, what's going to happen with the group of five right now after what's happened with Liberty, and now the aftermath of their good players leaving, hopping in the portal right away. We've seen it happen to some other teams. Unlike SMU G5 with big NIL collectives that can kind of keep them around. What do you think is going to go? What do you think is going to happen with these G5 teams? Because I just don't see them being able to keep up with these Power 5 schools and being able to continually compete at a high level. You talked about Liberty. They played a terrible schedule, but I'm almost thinking it might be the only way for G5 schools to get the recognition at a national level, because otherwise you don't go undefeated. You're not getting that New Year's Six invite. So what are your thoughts on all of that? It's
a good question. It's absolutely a good question. And by the way, I almost forgot to finish the thought on that. My thought was, why doesn't South Dakota State just step in for Liberty in that game? Because I thought they would have been a more competitive opponent. But all that's South Dakota State, for those who don't know, they're on like a 26-game winning streak. They lost their opener last season, won the national championship, and are playing in the national championship. So they're I've watched them in person when they came and played in the Twin Stadium. They are something else. But going back to the question, I think the G5, they almost are going to have to evolve into something unique. And I'm not saying this in a bad way, because yes, I think this year, by the way, was just a terrible year for the G5. Every team that people thought was going to make it through lost too fast. I mean, Liberty was basically written off for almost the entire season until just everybody else lost. I mean, I remember Air Force seemed like they were the ones that were going to make it. Fresno State's always got a shot at making it. we wondered, FSMU, Tulane, obviously. Tulane just couldn't quite make it. It was all of that stuff. If Tulane had beat SMU, I think they might have been the one to go in there, but after years where we were spoiled by that incredible Tulane season last season, obviously Cincinnati before they moved to the Big 12, we were kind of trained to expect things like, the G5 team is going to go up there and completely wreck things. But every now and again, we had games where the G5 program, I mean, the most famous, or not the most famous, but one of the ones I always think of is 2007, where USC and Georgia both kind of got inferior opponents. USC was locked into the Big Ten, probably into the Rose Bowl, so they played a very weak Illinois team because they were the next team in after the main team. I think it was Ohio State that year winning the championship, and you had Georgia facing Hawaii, which just Hawaii's Cinderella season got obliterated in the Sugar Bowl. But going back to the 12-team playoff, I think will somewhat help the G5s, because if you're the G5 team that made the playoff, I don't think we're going to see any real opt-outs from those guys. I mean, look at Caden Salter. He waited until after the Fiesta Bowl. Now he's declared and he's in the transfer portal. That's how it should be. I think no one's complaining about that. That's a guy who clearly cared about his team. And I mean, okay, I'm going to be hesitant on that one. I mean, especially the transfer portal, he wanted to show off too, probably, although Ken Oregon didn't really make that a great opportunity for him. But I think we'll see some of that. But also, we're going to see the one thing that's fascinating, and I know people have said this several times, the top 10 players right now in the 247 rankings for next season, like all 10 are committed to different schools, which has never really happened before. We're seeing a sort of democratization of recruiting, and it isn't just the NILs, it's also the portal, because now suddenly you might be a promising player, but you're behind someone who may or may not be that great. You might want to transfer, and suddenly this might open up opportunities for some of the G5 programs. I mean, Caden Salter, he's great. I mean, sorry to keep bringing him up, but he also moved from a P5 program to Liberty, and now suddenly everyone's paying attention to him. So I wonder if we're going to see, it isn't the most thrilling option, because it almost sounds like you're turning some G5 programs into slightly mercenary outfits where it's like, yeah, we'll take the player, and then if they get really good, we'll just lose them at the end of the season. But it's an interesting question. I think the playoff at the very least is going to be more rewarding now. I think a lot of folks are going to be looking forward to that, looking forward to seeing what team gets in each year, who's going to be the G5 team to get in or the G4 team to get in. But it is, you've touched on probably one of the biggest questions in all of it. And the other macro level question, and one we'll certainly probably get into in the offseason, is this gradual movement to, will we get the very top FBS program sort of splitting off? And that, Charlie Baker, the head of the NCAA, has already kind of given an initial conceptual proposal. Like what he proposed, anything that gets proposed, it would be like 3 or 4 years from now. It's like the whole saga of FSU losing the ACC, leaving the ACC. If they get out, it's going to still be like 2 or 3 years from now. Like everything is still kind of in the slow process. And then the idea of creating a separate, larger division, or say division that's attuned to the way big time college football is heading, that might be another driving wedge in something that could create even more problems for G5. But the problem is, I don't want to necessarily jump to what it would do, because it's so unpredictable. I don't think anyone rightfully can predict how it will turn out, what would happen there. And there's a lot to it. And I saw hands go up the moment we started touching on this. So, Scorpio, what's on your thought? And then we'll get to John, Ski Mask Smurfy, and then we'll let up Elizabeth.
So I've kind of written down on this, and when you were talking about the zaniness, I was thinking, oh, I realized it when you were talking about how crazy it was, the Pop-Tart Bowl, and I've realized the Vanier Cup and most of the conference championships are played 1 to 2 weeks from another, and I thought, what if we went fully zany and just did a bowl between the Vanier Cup champ and an 8-win team just for fun?
Okay. So I'm gonna give you some backup here, because people are not gonna know what you're talking. I know exactly what you're talking about. So the Vanier Cup, that's Canada's college football national championship. So Canada, like Mexico, like Japan, plays college football. They're pretty good at it because they have the CFL. Enough of their players go there. There's some really strong teams like Laval and Montreal and Western Ontario, aka Western. And there are some decent teams out there. Calgary and used to be good UBC, but honestly, those teams, they're not bad, but they would. I'm going to say right now, any FBS team would wax them. They would be a good matchup for a Division II team that not necessarily the D2 champ, but that would be a fun game. I would absolutely be down with that. I would love to see, frankly, an international tournament. That would be a 4C tournament, like the champion of the Vanier Cup, the champion of D2 NCAA football, the champions of ONIFA down in Mexico, which would be like this year, I believe. I think Monterrey Tech won. I forgot.
I thought about it.
Yeah, and then the Japan's champion, which seems to be always Kwansai Gaikuin, but we'll set that aside. That would be a wacky like February or like spring college football game, maybe January college football tournament, like a week or two after the regular tournament ends. Like, all right, now let's watch an international tournament between I guess it was Harding this year in D2 and KG Fighters. The was it Montreal? Who won this season? The Vanier Cup was Montreal Carabins, yeah, and and Monterey Tech. Like people with just the curiosity factor of it, that would be a fun one. Oh my goodness!
Put it on ESPN, it would make a lot of money. And honestly, I think it could be if it was played. I think in early December, you could play it in Montreal or Boston, since one of the first college football games was between Harvard and McGill. Like just move it 1 year it's in Boston, 1 year it's in Montreal, just to represent that historic value between the two cities and the two schools.
That's a fun idea. For those who don't know, Harvard Stadium basically determined the rules of American football because as our caller pointed out, McGill was an early college football team, so was Toronto, and with all of these programs, these universities trying to figure out the rules, they were debating about how big the field should be. And it sounded like things were leading towards a Canadian slightly larger field until Harvard just said, no, we just built Harvard Stadium. It's built to these specifications. We're not changing it. These are the rules. And that led to kind of the Canadian rules design and the U.S. rules design for how big a stadium. So you can thank Harvard. Hug a Harvard grad. No, when it comes to the size of the football field. Let's see here. John, then Ski Masks Murphy, then we'll get to Elizabeth.
Yeah, I actually am not sure where the guy that just asked the question went, but yeah. So we've talked about it before. I'm a G5 fan as well, and I know it's something that's we've talked about in weeks and in other calls. But I think of even with the situation of the portal as a more positive situation. I think there's a lot of good routes. I think we either hit a possibility where we either, like you said, get a lot of transfers who are coming down for the P5s, which the show out, and I think step by step that improves G5 teams. Or on the flip side, if we start getting better high school recruits, I think no matter what, it improves the parity of the game, even if it's a little chaotic on the G5 level. And I think step by step, it still makes us the G5 programs better programs. And I also think too with the playoff, with the G5 champion going to the playoff next year, I think that's going to help a lot with getting possible guys out there, hoping to get that one spot into the playoff versus waiting out in these now mega conferences. I do hope though with the committee, when they do, committee does choose next year, they do look at this Liberty game and realize that they really do need to look at other factors like strength of schedule. I'm sorry, all due respect to Liberty, I mean, you play the bottom of the bottom of the power conferences, in my opinion, this year, and that should not be rewarded for having what frankly is a cupcake schedule. So I hope the committee looks at that and really improves their decision making in next year and in years beyond.
So Ski Mask Murphy, then Elizabeth.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to talk about Group of Five, but I just wanted to comment about your thing about saying like Harvard like makes the rules of football. That Harvard's so stubborn about controlling football that they weren't the last Division I team to install lights at their stadium.
I don't know. I always thought
From
Michigan was one of those. No, but I mean, it
I,
was.
I think I think it was like until 2011 they had no lights, and
That
every game
sounds
had
like
to
a
be
very
played at
Harvard
noon.
thing. I don't know if anyone's
Yeah,
watched. Like, I remember the last Harvard Yale game only because Harvard is such a was a difficult sports information department to work with. They had some guy. I don't want to get too into it, but I remember then we watched the game, and when at halftime when the guys are going to the locker room, all the players had to duck to get into the tunnel because you had to step down to get to the tunnel, and the tunnel was too short for modern football players with all their gear, and it was absolutely a striking image.
yeah. But to get back to the group of five question that someone was worried, I think the group of five is sort of going to have like that prime, almost revert back to maybe sort of that prime TCU, Boise State, BCS Buster era, where a lot of guys are gonna realize like these prime schools either like well back then like guys didn't want to have to wait and guys would go to a place where they knew they could play. And then also a lot of those smaller schools sort of had areas they specialized in scouting in and being able to find very good talent that people didn't look at. So I think it's gonna like sort of I think four sort of was expanded to like the right well, I wouldn't say the right, but like a great perfect way to like push power to be too concentrated to like the power schools. And like but two, it was too small of a slot, so no one so the ones who didn't really care didn't have to go to a big school for a title. They just wanted to be seen on TV. And I think at 12 it may be the same way. And as some guys may I think probably two or three very powerful group of five teams are gonna rise trying to get that playoff spot moving forward. And then I think it's just, and then I think from there, maybe two teams from Power Five may make the playoff one year, and then I think from there it's just going to democratize all the power being concentrated to the Big Four, and things are going to move forward. And I'm not going to say be balanced, but it's going to be better than it is now.
I'm hoping so. I think it will be. I'm really optimistic about the 12-team playoff. I think more optimistic than I had been about just about any of the changes to all of this. But Elizabeth, what's going on? You've been super patient.
Oh, no worries. I just had a lighter comment just regarding I'm seeing more celebrations and dancing that's being allowed by the officials. Like, for example, Deion Walker with Kentucky did a dance after a quarterback sack against Clemson, which I thought was hilarious. But are you seeing that? Like, why they are being a little more lenient towards letting them do their thing?
I agree. I've noticed that too. It's like I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if it was something that because they always have like a national change to the rules whenever they have new things they're going to emphasize.
Right.
Usually the safety things. I hadn't heard anything about the refs were going to be like more forgiving of celebrations, but they seem to have. And a lot of folks
Exactly.
have observed that. You're not alone at all on this.
I,
And it's wonderful
I think it's
because
wonderful too because it's really it's very lighthearted, it's entertaining, it's fun, and they're happy, they're celebrating, and why not let them do that? I think that brings another element to how fun college football is. So I like it. I'm enjoying it.
gosh, I'm trying to remember. There was a game, and it was actually a Washington game, and it was probably 10, 12 years ago. And it was absolutely absurd. It was the quarterback. I watched the game live. He makes a touchdown pass. It should be winning the game, and or tying the game. And it was funny because he kind of jumps up and shoot the ball almost shoots up vertically. Like he almost like I think he ran the ball in, and he just kind of
Right.
spirals the ball straight up.
Okay.
And they called the penalty and they missed the PAT, and that ended up being the deciding factor in the game. And people were so angry. It was like, this is so stupid. This rule is stupid. It wasn't like he wasn't like going in the opponent's face or anything like that. And I absolutely agree. I think it's such a silly rule. It got too extreme. I mean, I get like, okay, you can go too far. You can go too far. You don't want like taunting that's going to create a hazard on the field and fight breaks out. But a lot of this stuff, it's so mild. And it's absolutely it was a shame when it was happening before, and it's wonderful to see it now.
I agree. I mean, one of my favorite players who unfortunately passed, Alex Collins, did Irish dancing, and he did, a little Irish dance after a touchdown, and he did the same thing when he played for the Ravens. But no, I enjoy it. I think it's wonderful.
Absolutely. Now I'm going to be like, my head is like totally trying to remember who Jake Locker. I looked it up. Gosh, that was a longer ago. I was like, it was Jake Locker at Washington when Ty Willingham, I think, was still the head coach. No. He was a freshman then. So it was actually probably whoever. Gosh, was that, yeah, that was Sark, actually. It might have been under Sark when that happened. I can't quite remember.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, no. I think it was, it was BYU. It was actually, gosh, it was the 2008 Ty Willingham's infamous, like the nadir of Washington football, their worst season ever, 0-12. They had the Crapple Cup where both teams went in. I believe Wazoo also was winless, and they went in, and it went into double overtime. I mean, it was actually no. They had Wazoo had beat Portland State, which shouldn't count. That was an FCS program. So you had these two teams going in, and that was the only FBS win for either team. Was Wazoo beat Washington in double overtime in the infamous Crapple Cup. But
oh my gosh, I think I remember that.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's see. We have one more person up here who requests. I'm going to let you up here just so we can get a nice round number, and then we'll look to slowly wrap this up. But stick around, Elizabeth. Absolutely. Melody, what's going on?
Can you hear me?
Okay, sure perfect. Can.
So I'm just going to chime in as a Washington fan with the Jake Locker penalty in the BYU game. That was ultimately what kind of it led to 0-12 because we should have gotten the win early. Like a lot of stuff led to 0-12, but that was the 0-12 season. It was a BS penalty. And yeah, interestingly enough, though, with our latest game, so Jake Locker, we did not train him. So guide dogs have a thing called intelligent disobedience. And Jake Locker did not employ that in the Apple Cup, where we could have won by taking a knee in the Crapple Cup. And once again, we're clearly still not teaching it at Washington because Mike Penix should have called an audible and just taken a knee and didn't. And we almost lost this time. So,
I and again, it's so funny, Melody, because we talked to really early on in this. This is 90 minutes now, so I don't blame people if they weren't here earlier. I kind of get what they were trying to do. The injury was unexpected. You don't really expect one of your 11 to go down at that point. The rules were kind of odd on that. Again, as I talked, the way the rules are set up, Sark had the option to run down 10 seconds, which he obviously was not going to take. And it was such, because they were going to try and ice the game. Obviously they weren't really trying necessarily to try anything wacky to get the first down. But if it had worked as it should have given Washington, should have given Texas like 15 seconds. And who knew that was going to happen? So he's
been injured like for weeks at this point. Like anything risky involving Dylan Johnson, you just don't want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it aggravated the same injury as I said after. But I'm glad I'm hoping he's playing in the game. It sounds like he may. But yeah, it would have been something else. I'm glad. I mean, it was, for those who didn't know, Dylan Johnson, like he was in the injury tent. He came out to watch the end of the game. And then for those who watched the broadcast, he was on the cart being taken off the field, but just cheering like a madman because he got to see his Huskies pull it off. Because I can't even imagine how crushing that would have been for him if that had been the end of the game, or at least the game had ended on that. And before I forget, before I leave this, I'm going to. I found the clip of the of the end of that Locker, because again, it was the end of the game. Jake Locker, I want you all to see this. I'm gonna put it in the replies just so that folks can see it. But this is the Jake Locker excessive celebration. This will piss you off. I guarantee you. I say that as neutral fans. Yeah, it'll piss people off. I just threw it in the replies. So after this, take a chance to look at it. It's a YouTube clip from like 2008, which is when it happened. But that was just such a demoralizing way for them. And I forgot BYU was ranked number 15, so it was it was going to be an upset, no less. But my goodness,
it's like a low-key rivalry with BYU. It's kind of weird.
So we're going to slowly wrap this up. Ski Master Murphy, I saw your hand up. I'll let you have the last word right now before we start wrapping this up.
Oh no, I just wanted to say hi to Melody, a fellow member of the Big Ten championship game that's taking place on Monday. Just wanted to walk into the conference and say, let's have fun.
It is. It's going to be future Big Ten versus Big Ten Northern teams. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, the D1 Final Four, if you count FCS and FBS together, you got Montana, you got South Dakota State, you got Michigan, you got Washington, all very close to that Canadian border this time around. I mean, the last time we had non-Southern teams in the championship game, it was the rivals of the current two teams. It was Ohio State and Oregon. So go figure that one. But I think this was a good talk. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up in 90 minutes. My voice, as I've said, it's about 70% of what it normally is, but it's coming back. Hopefully I don't lose it too much in the championship game. I'm going to be in Houston. Maybe we'll get a chance to do our CFB talk from there before the game kicks off. I'll certainly still be in Houston next Tuesday when we have our next one. That's typically on Tuesday nights. We always do these on Tuesday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern. My name is Bobak Ha'Eri, part of the team that runs our CFB. I head our media organization. I also work with CBS Sports Jay on Jay Raja on the CFB Survivor Show, which is a formal podcast if you're into that. But if you miss the beginning of this, it automatically turns into a recording here on Twitter. I will get this thing uploaded to podcasts wherever you get a podcast. Is our CFB Talk. I want to thank all of you for joining us. This has been a great season so far. Going to finish up strong with a pair of championship games in FCS and FBS. Always appreciate hearing from you. There's lots of great callers, lots of great thoughts. And I hope all of you have a great rest of your week. Now I'm going to hang up and listen.